Hello everyone, welcome to the video. So in this video I'm going to be talking about two different ideas in Matlab. One of them is going to be the, I'll erase all this. One of them is going to be the for loop and the other one is going to be the while loop. And actually now that I realize I just said that, I'll probably actually just make two different videos. One of them being this example of the for loop and then the other one being doing this example of the while loop. So I'll just go ahead and start with this example and then see how much time we have. And I'll probably just end, I have a feeling I'll end the video and then just make another one. Yeah, I just don't want to run into any software issues that I ran into last time. But anyway, here we go. So just by reading this example, so I'm asking to start with the row vector containing 10 elements, all of them equal to the value of 1. You may use the ones function in Matlab, and with all of this so far, I want you to create the Fibonacci sequence to 10 values using a for loop out of the starting rows or row vector of ones. Just to give a little bit of background information, if you don't know what the Fibonacci sequence is, it's kind of known as a mathematical phenomena that happens to describe a lot of patterns in nature, even though the Fibonacci sequence isn't necessarily considered something that happens naturally, because the sequence goes, you start with two values, 1 and 1, and the next term in the sequence is the sum of the previous two terms. So my next number here is just simply 1 plus 1. The following number will be the sum of the previous two terms, just like before. So this number will now be 2 plus 1. And this number will now be 3 plus 2. The next number will be 5 plus 3, 8, and so forth. It just continues on. And it's really interesting if you decide to go separately read about it and find out exactly how much the Fibonacci sequence, how much of an impact it has and how much it appears in nature. It's really amazing. Okay, but anyway, getting back to all this stuff. So a for loop. So a for loop is essentially you use it to repeat a statement for any number of set times. So you use it to repeat a statement for any number of set times. So you can, that statement can be that you want this to happen to this matrix or that to happen to this matrix. It can be like functions or adding numbers, subtracting numbers, using any kind of mathematics to manipulate a certain matrix a set number of times. So you can definitely have a starting point. You can have an ending point. You can name different variables that are going to be involved in the for loop, and I don't know yet if we'll do it, but I might use a counter just to see what's going on, in the actual for loop, but we will see. So now getting back to this, when I start writing my code, just like I've said before, it's always a really good idea to write the title of your code and also the goal of what your code is supposed to be doing, or the goal that your code is striving for. So in this case, I'm just going to call this Matlab ENGR100 example, or for loop example. You can even put things like your name, the date, things like that. That's in good habit as well. So create Fibonacci sequence with for loop. It's basically the summation of my goal. You'll always want to start out with CLC and clear, because these things will clear the command window and workspace. Workspace meaning they will clear any previous variables set to certain matrices, things like that. The next thing I want to do is start with the actual example. So here it says I want to start with the row vector containing 10 elements, all of them equal to the value of 1, and you may use the ones function in Matlab. So just to describe to you very briefly about what the ones function in Matlab does. So if I say that x is equal to 1's 10, that's not what I wanted, 10, then what it's going to do is it's going to create, obviously, this. There's a lot of ones in there. There are 10 columns and 10 rows of ones, and they are nothing but ones here. But I can specify whether I want, like, how many rows and how many columns I want. So if I wanted just one row with 10 columns, which is something like this, then I can say the first number that I put in is originally my rows, number of rows, and the second number that I'll have will be the number of columns, and they will all be ones. And that's exactly what I get in return. So I know that this is where I'm placing my ones vector. So I know that now when I go into my script, into my editor, and I type this, that's what I'm getting. Next thing is I'll actually start my for loop. And I'll start writing like for, and I'll continue. But before I get into that, there's one thing I need to mention to you. So I'm going to write a randomized, let's make it a little less randomized, or a little less. These numbers are kind of big. Let's try that. So if I wanted to find out what was in the fifth element in a row matrix, or in a row vector or a column vector, and I wanted Matlab to tell me what was in this case, the fifth or the fourth. Let's do the fourth. The fourth element in X, I would call to it by typing this. So this is the fourth element of X. So if you count here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So Matlab should be returning that the fourth element is in fact equal to this, 23. When I press enter, and sure enough, that's exactly what it does. So if I ask for the fifth, it's going to call for the fifth here, which is 5, which so happens to be 5. Sixth, if I call for the seventh, it's going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Or it tells you specifically it exceeds the dimensions of the matrix, which is an even better answer. Okay, so now that we know that, keep that in mind. I need a starting point and I need an ending point. So keep in mind, though, that the Fibonacci sequence, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, this is the Fibonacci sequence here. So I need, if I have that, let's copy this and put it as a comment here. If I have this here, and I need to change this, and I need to turn this into this, pretty much. I think I'm missing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Missing 2 numbers here. I need to change this matrix into looking something like this. The first number, if you notice, that needs to be changed is this third one here. This cannot be a 1, this has to be a 2. This has to be a 3, this has to be a 5, and so forth, right? So my starting point is going to be at 3. You will see why this works out later, because I will end at 10. So what I'm going to say is that x at the ith placement, at the ith element, so in this case, so far we have the third element, which is this one. I want to say that that element is going to be equal to the one before it, which in this case is the ith minus 1 element. So we're going back, because at this point I minus 1 is 2, right? So if I go to the second element of x, it's this one. And I want to add it to the one even before the second one, so I need to go back twice. So x ith minus 2. And the cool thing about my for loop is that it will do that for your starting number or value all the way up to your ending value. So it's going to do that for at this point, or at some point I will be 3, at another point it'll be 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to 10. So now if I run this, Matlab does nothing because I didn't ask for anything. But let me show, so I'll take off this semicolon, that way it doesn't suppress it. And I'll take off this semicolon. And there it is. So this is my original. And this is my secondary, or my first iteration in my for loop. My second, third, and so forth. So what needed to change was this one, right? And in fact it did. It changed to 2, which is great. Great so far, right? In my next iteration of I, this value needed to change, or this value needed to change. But now that I had this already set to x, when I started changing this value, or when I started making changes to this new x for this value, then it was able to identify that 2 plus 1 was in fact equal to 3. Or it used the previous element and the second previous element, and it added those two, and it gave me the value of my next element. And it did that basically up to 10 elements, which is good, which is in fact what I wanted. So that's pretty much it. I have created the Fibonacci sequence using a for loop, and you can of course use something as simple as display DISP, and you can, well, once I suppress these, you can display it there. Or of course you can use the more complicated fprintf. I think in this case %g works. Let's put a space or an enter or a down a line here, and I want to call for x. I hope this works. And there we are. I guess in this case, just display X works. Or even just X if you wanted to. That's fine. But Matlab doesn't like it. It tells you that it needs to be suppressed. And if you fix it, it puts a semicolon there, which is kind of funny. But that's pretty much it. So yeah, I'll stop the video there. Thank you for watching. One thing about your quiz though is that you will need to look through week, I think I'll put it under week 4, the weekly preparation for week 4. So make sure you look at that for your quiz. I'm not going to display it up here because I know that I kind of want to avoid you like skimming through the video, because this is really good information if you need to learn MATLAB in a future, or for a future class, or if you're an ME, if you're pretty much any major at this point, MATLAB is really good to know. So make sure you go ahead and look at that weekly prep 4, and I'll go ahead and put all the hints there. And that goes as far as like for my class, section MO2 and MO6. So if you're in any other section, ignore that. The video for you is over, I guess. But otherwise, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.